I'm Leah Eskelin, Park Ranger at the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge here in Soldotna, Alaska. Relatively new to interpretation, I'm learning really what it means to take the reins, to plan interpretive programs, and most importantly, be a leader in my interpretive work.
There has never been a more important time for interpretive leadership in this country, and arguably the world. No environmental topic has ever loomed so large or borne so heavy a weight on the shoulders of humanity as what I'm going to talk about today: global climate change. For years, we have buried our heads in the sand, hoping this change was a hoax, a horrible mistake, or at least far wrong in its predicted timescale. Political leaders have come and gone, and no matter their intent, we as a nation have failed, year after year, to see meaningful results from their discussions, laws, and caucuses. Religious leaders have chosen sides, have led their masses to one side of the issue or the other, and with that often deepened the divide between the believers and the doubters at the time when we most need to search for points of agreement instead of differences. Finally, environmental leaders, like those we have listened to on TED.com, or those we know in our agencies, have reached a critical point in time where they can move forward collectively towards productive goals, or continue to mull over the options, debate the differences, and get stuck on the minutiae of their chosen fields. So who are the environmental leaders of today? Can you think of someone who speaks for your agency? Someone who cares enough about the fate of this world to take action? Whose face comes to mind? There's a preconceived notion that it takes a world leader to produce world change, and I don't disagree, but the definition of world here needs to be redefined. I will argue that you, my SFA friends, are those environmental leaders, those world leaders who are just what we need for lasting positive change to be possible, right now. You, us, we, the students at SFA learning how best to unwrap our world for the public through resource interpretation. We are the environmental leaders who must take action now. We have the responsibility to act, to educate, to love our fellow man enough to dedicate ourselves to sharing what we know and how we can bring positive change to our world. Right now, we happily share in ranger talks and walks the beauty and complexity of our natural sites. I walk our refuge trails with visitors, talking about bear safety, plant identification, and how our boreal forest works. It is just recently that I realized that I have missed the mark with these innocuous topics. If I fail to teach about what most threatens this ecosystem, I fail my audience. We fail our world. Now, when I talk about our world, I want to be perfectly clear that this is a world on many scales. First, we have our family. We have the choices in our homes that will impact how effective we are as educators and leaders. How are we to expect change in the lives of others if we do not first live that which we preach? Our second world is our local community, where we can do the most good. We are leaders in our communities. We have the ear of our school children, young families, those who can see themselves and their children on the 100-year scale. This world is where grassroots organization thrives, where interpersonal relationships are essential if we want a lasting message. Third, we have our nation. This is where the quagmire begins, where politics and propaganda leads to misinformation, accidental and intentional, and where there is a disconnect between words and actions. Finally, we have the world stage, where all the impacts of every other world is felt, seen, explored, and where the issues, problems, concerns are so big that everyone gets scared off and major change goes unaccomplished. We as environmental leaders can change what is happening out on the global scale by dedicating ourselves to our local worlds. I have great access to the biological study data for the Kenai Refuge. I don't doubt that you do too at your sites. Here, studies that are showing climate trends with significant possible impacts are complete, peer-reviewed, and published. We have GIS mapping experts available to produce maps that clearly depict this data in a user-friendly fashion. What is missing is the interface between our scientists and our public. A paper presented at a brown bag lunch, special event, or an internal video conference is a great way of sharing these findings, but may only reach 100 or so people. It's like preaching to the choir. We as interpreters meet in meaningful ways thousands of visitors each year. A quick look at my summer season alone finds that 100 or so visitor contacts per day, 5 days a week, for 3 months is about the norm. That's 6,300 visitors per summer for just one park ranger. We have at our fingertips a great opportunity for a shared, concrete response to the need for public climate change education. Okay, dream with me a while. What if every federal public land visitor center spoke the same language when it came to teaching climate change? What if we had a single exhibit tailored to the story of each site that expressed our agency's position on climate change with strong science backing up each point? I work at a visitor center that is well loved but well worn. It tells a simple story of the biology of the area, the animals that you can find here, and where we are in relation to the other public lands in the state. We politely skirt the politically charged issues, but in doing so we do a disservice to the visitors who should know what it means to the land they are standing on if climate change continues as predicted. There will never be a better time to change this than now, as we stand at this point in our climate change model where collective efforts to mitigate our negative impacts on global warming might still offer some relief to the extreme changes currently in store. Here are the mapped results of a recent climate change study here on the Kenai. A drop in the bucket when you look at the masses of data being collected here on things like wetland drying, fire ecology changes, and spruce bark beetle infestations. Look at these results. Look at what this land will experience in the time it takes for our children to grow up. This is the Kenai Peninsula now. It is a mix of boreal forest and maritime biomes. Our landscape is perfect for boreal animals like moose, bears, and migratory birds. In just 30 years, look at what changes. Watch the boreal forest retract. Here is the peninsula in 60 years. By the time today's toddlers are retiring from work, there will be no forest to recreate in. It will have shifted towards what the Aleutian Islands look like now. The trees will be gone. This is a big deal. Here is our 100-year forecast for the Kenai Refuge, and thus the Kenai Peninsula. Not only have we seen a complete biome shift, but imagine, with a completely different biome, we must also have completely different recreational and commercial activities, those things that right now we encourage, regulate, and rely on for our local economy. It is very important to see these kinds of results and know that we must not become fearful ourselves. We do not carry the weight of this data alone, nor do we have to solve the problems that are contributing to it. Our nation and the world has a record of banding together when facing a great adversary. But if no one knows about it, there can be no expectation of change, political pressure, social movement, nothing. We are also not alone within our agencies. There are policies in place to encourage our work. In fact, these policies almost require us to include climate change in our interpretive programs. Here's a policy for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Our strategic plan focuses on 3 key elements: adaptation, mitigation, and engagement. Quoting the strategy plan, engagement includes reaching out to service employees, local, national, and international partners in the public and private sectors, key constituencies and stakeholders, and the broader citizenry of this country to join forces and seek solutions to the challenges to fish and wildlife conservation posed by climate change. Specifically, the plan puts in no uncertain terms what our role in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service means. Again quoting, "The service will, in conjunction with conservation partners, develop useful and accessible information resources to help Americans fully appreciate the significant implications of climate change on species and their habitats, and to engage these constituencies in seeking solutions." Again from the strategic plan, it states the service's plan for climate change is a blueprint for action in a time of uncertainty. It calls for the service to rise to the challenges at hand, lay the foundation for wise decisions in the future, and take steps right now to ensure our nation's fish and wildlife resources will thrive in the years to come. Here's a policy for the Park Service. The Park Service Director, John Jarvis, is quoted as saying, "One of the most precious values of the national parks is their ability to teach us about ourselves and how we relate to the natural world. This important role may prove invaluable in the near future as we strive to understand and adapt to a changing climate." From the Park Service website on climate change response, it states that educating about climate change is one of the major goals of the Park Service. I quote, "National parks are visible examples of how climate change can affect natural and cultural resources. Through clear communication, we will prepare park staff and connect visitors with information concerning the impacts to parks and steps the agency is taking to preserve our heritage." As we wrap our heads around this new task, it is important to remember that with responsibility comes a need for respect. We have a great responsibility to our visitors to respect their sovereignty, just as they respect the agencies for which we work. We read in Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, that the road to shared vision is paved with free choice. Selling the public on our vision requires payment and is not the way to reach shared vision. Instead, we must inspire our audience and offer a goal that is worthy of personal commitment. What better goal than a healthy planet, and more locally, a continuation of the natural beauty in the land that this audience has chosen personally to visit? Rob Hopkins stated in his TED Talk on the transition to a world without oil that life is a series of things you're not quite ready for. I get butterflies when I think about broaching this climate change subject with our refuge audience. Oil industry not only surrounds the Kenai Refuge and largely fuels the local economy, but it is active even on our refuge lands. But we are no longer talking about them and us, oil versus renewable, with or without. We no longer have the benefit of leaving this discussion for future generations to manage. It is ours. It is now.
It's time for us to be leaders, to interpret our world in meaningful ways for our visitors, and most importantly, it's time, right now, to confidently introduce the topic of climate change in a relevant, concrete, conscientious way in our visitor centers, our campgrounds, on our trails, and in our communities too. Our mission now is clear. Our agencies are behind us. We don't have another second to wait. Thank you.